let me start. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today that is being co-hosted with Data Science Dojo. So it's Data Science Dojo and KNIME. They invited us to do it today. And I am here to talk to you a little bit how you can build this thing called data apps using KNIME in a totally low-code, no-code fashion in order to empower your data science, data analytics solutions. So, if you ask me what is a data app, I'll tell you that in KNIME, the way we use it, it's an interface that is interactive and flexible for your data science solutions. So it allows the users to interact with the solutions that you come up with. They can be simple, they can just involve uploading a data set and plotting a graph, or they can be very complex and involve deep learning models. So they can interact with them without actually having to see the machinery, the logic of the solution, making the access to the solutions even more democratic, right? And the cool thing about it is that you can build these things totally for free. It saves time, as I'm going to show you, very quick. Doesn't involve CSS, JavaScript. You don't need to have the UX front-end engineer. If you have a small team, if you are a single person creating the solutions, it's easy. And I will show you how to do that with KNIME today. So as Nathan already said, my name is Aline Bessa. I am a data scientist at KNIME. I've been working for KNIME for a year and a half now for the evangelism team. And this is my email here. If you have any additional questions after we are done with this presentation, feel free to shoot me a note. I would be happy to help you. And this is our agenda today. We are going to give a quick intro to KNIME. I don't know how many of you are familiar with our company and our software. Then we are going to talk a little bit about data apps, show you how they can be built, then give a quick live demo, and then close with a few notes on how to deploy these data apps. The example that we're going to give today, I hope that Nathan already posted on the chat, so feel free to access that. It may take a few seconds to load because it's deployed in a machine that is a demo machine, but it should work. And stay tuned to see how it's built. So let's start by talking about KNIME a little bit. So what is KNIME? KNIME is a company. It has offices in Europe, in Germany, and in the US. It was born in the university, and it has close ties to university and to research, very close ties to the open source community, the free software philosophy, and it also has a network of global partners. But also people use the term KNIME to refer to our most popular product, which is KNIME Analytics Platform. This is the product that we are going to be talking about today. It is completely open source, completely free, and it is with this software that you are going to build your data science solutions, gathering data, wrangling the data, coming up with models, visualizations, and ultimately you are also going to use this software to build data apps. We have another product. This one is more commercial, KNIME Business Hub, and this is the one that we use to deploy the data science solutions for a large audience, maybe with an interface that is accessible through a browser, maybe as a service with a REST API. It's our commercial complement. We also have a big community, a very lively community as well, especially in our KNIME forum and also in our social media profiles. We have profiles on LinkedIn, on Twitter. And people, because it's open source, right? It's really nice that sometimes people contribute not only with code itself, but also with low code components. We are going to talk about components a little bit today, but they are basically a way of aggregating a functionality in KNIME and making this functionality shareable with others. Components are very important for data apps. I'll show you why. And we also like to award our community. So, members that are outstanding, that contribute to our community, we award them with the Contributors of the Month, our Hall of Fame. So, it's all of that. It's a company, there is a community around it, and there is the free software and the commercial complement. And what is KNIME Analytics Platform? So KNIME Analytics Platform is a tool for data analysis, manipulation, visualization, reporting. This is how it looks like, as you can see in this image here. This is the platform. As I said, it's free, and it's based on the visual programming paradigm. So each one of these little squares that you see here is a node, and each one of these nodes corresponds to a functionality. There are nodes to read Excel files. There are nodes to train decision tree models. There are nodes for bar chart visualizations. And by concatenating these nodes from left to right, you create what we call a workflow. And these workflows are going to be your data analytics, your data science solutions. KNIME has a lot of extensions as well for more specific tasks, such as text mining, network mining, cheminformatics, and it integrates with a variety of other platforms and softwares and languages and paradigms. You know, we integrate with Java, with R, with Python, with Keras, with Plotly, and this is how it looks like, right? So you create a workflow, as we have this one here, and then these are just 2 visualizations that you get with 2 of our visualization nodes. And this is a cool GIF of how the platform looks like. This is how you build a workflow. You search for a node here in the node repository, which is this little panel here at the bottom. The nodes, as you can see, they can correspond to pre-processing tasks, you know, a joiner to join 2 different files, reader nodes to read files, partitioning, and then you can see that this is going to be a machine learning thing, decision tree. So, you know, you search the nodes here and you drag and you drop them to the workflow editor. And this is, you know, you create a workflow by doing that, and they are going to be here in your workspace. And then these nodes, you configure them. We're going to show you that in the demo, and then you execute them. And by doing that, you end up with the final result of your solution. And we have many nodes. We have over 4,000 nodes. So KNIME Analytics platform is really powerful in the sense that it allows you to build a very large variety of solutions, right? We have nodes for cloud access, transformation, data analytics, visualization, deployment, you know, in that little node repository. And as you install more extensions as you go, it becomes really powerful. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time giving you an introduction to KNIME, because I think by seeing the demo as well and by seeing the rest of the presentation, you'll get a hang of it. I want to go to our introduction to data apps already. And I think that the best way to do that is to start with a practical problem. So this problem here is going to be in the context of a company. And I hope that this motivates you for the importance of data apps, right? These interfaces. So people don't have to see the workflows, they can just see a nice interface instead and interact with that instead of playing with the nodes and with the workflow. So here, consider that we have a supermarket chain named ABC, and its CEO, her name is Claudia B. And the supermarket chain has 5 warehouses with all of the items in the US, different locations. Claudia is worried about a situation named stockout. It's a situation that occurs when customer orders exceed the available inventory of an item. That's not nice for a supermarket. So they have to keep an eye on stockouts. And Claudia, being the CEO, would like to know which of these 5 warehouses are more likely to suffer from stockouts, and also what kinds of items are going to be the most problematic. Stockouts for critical items or for slow-moving items, slow-moving in the supply chain, right? Regular items. So she wants to be able to understand that. And then she talks to Henry S. Henry S. is a data scientist. And Henry decided that to help Claudia, it's best to develop a data app for her, because then she will have an interactive interface that she will play with that will allow her to filter through warehouse location and different item type and then check the stockout situation. So he will build the solution using a workflow, but he will equip this workflow with certain nodes and structure in such a way that it will also generate an interface for Claudia to play with without having to see the workflow. And Claudia is very happy with that because she doesn't want to know, she doesn't want to learn anything about data processing. She just really wants to act when there are stockouts. And this is the example, right? So this is the workflow. Right here at the left, at the bottom, this is how this workflow for Claudia is going to look like. There is an Excel reader node that is going to read the stockout data. And then right here in the middle, this square that you see is not a node, it's actually a compilation of nodes inside this structure that we call meta node. So this is important just to encapsulate the workflow. It looks simpler, more modularized. This is nice for development, right? And then right after, and this meta node is going to do all the data preparation. It's going to get that data for the stockouts and separate per city, per warehouse, per type, per month. So all of this, data preparation is going to happen inside this meta node. And then right here we have a component. This is going to be important. And this component is going to correspond to the data app. Inside this component, we have all of these different nodes. So in a way, a component is similar to a meta node because it also contains all of these nodes and it hides the complexity from the first level of the workflow. But all of these nodes here, not only do they have a little bit of logic as well, but there are visualization nodes here that create this nice interface. You see there are some visualizations here, and widget nodes that allow Claudia to filter through the data and then update. The interface gets refreshed, re-executed, and then, you know, she can see the graphs for different locations and for different types of items. And these are the widgets, right? So she can filter through location, through different types of items. You will see this in the demo. But also, Claudia is interested in some forecasting. She not only wants to see where the stockouts are for the historic data and what types of items are the most affected, but she also wants predictions for the current month, right? The stockouts for the current month, per warehouse location, per item type. And this component here, as I said, generates this nice interface that we're seeing here. And this is what Claudia wants to interact with. So with the data app, Claudia doesn't need to interact with a workflow of any complexity. She doesn't need to interact with this underlying workflow. And you can check this interface here, deployed in this URL here, tinyurl.com/gstojo-9. So now that I have given you the motivation for data apps, right? Sometimes some people in a company or in a certain application, they just want the interface. They don't want to see the implementation of the workflow. I am going to show you how they're built. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that when you're building a data app, the first thing that you have to create is the data science solution with all of its requirements. So in the case of this application that we are discussing, it is important to have in your workflow, a part of the workflow taking care of the data preparation, right? Separating the data per warehouse, per item type. Claudia wants to see how many stockouts are happening in each warehouse per type. So you have to do some data pre-processing depending on the data you have at hand to tackle that. And Claudia also wants the forecasting for the current month, right? So you also have to build the logic for that. We are actually going to use another component for that, as I'm going to show you. But once you have all of these requirements met, then you think about the interface. Then you think about how you're going to equip this workflow with certain nodes, with a component, with certain visualization or widget nodes inside, in order to end up with a nice interface that can be shared with others. And the key things for data apps are then going to be these concepts that we're going to be discussing more and more as I go. Components, visualization nodes, and widget nodes for interactivity. Visualization, so the insights are there, components to actually create the interface, and interactivity with the widget nodes. So let's start talking a little bit about data visualization. Data science solutions, they tackle different tasks and they require different data visualization techniques for that. So this is also something that is going to be important for you to think about when you want to build a data app. If you're going to give graphs to your users to get insights from your analytics or your data science solution, they need to convey the information adequately. So for example, bar charts, as you can see here all the way to the left, are really nice to compare quantities across different groups. If you want correlations across different numeric attributes, you're going to use a scatter plot. If it's a text mining application, you're going to need a tag cloud for the terms that are the most popular. If you are analyzing a network, you're going to need network visualizations, and so on and so forth. Time series analysis usually heavily relies on line plots for trends. And KNIME has a large variety of data visualization nodes that basically tackle all of these different tasks. And they come in different flavors as well. The most important ones are going to be the native ones. They are web-based, they are interactive, and they require no scripting. So they are going to be in the node repository that you saw in that slide with the platform, and you will see again in the demo. There is an entire part just for visualization nodes, and the most elaborate part is going to correspond to the JavaScript ones. So we have scatter plots, bar charts, but we also have Plotly nodes. They are similar, but they come from an external library, like they come from Plotly. And we are very excited as well about these new nodes that we have been developing. They have been out since KNIME 4.6. Now KNIME Analytics platform is 4.7. And basically, they cover a few of the functionalities already, but the cool thing is that while you're configuring your visualization, for example, if it's a scatter plot, in the configuration, you have to state which of the columns of the tabular data set you want to use to generate the scatter plot, right? A scatter plot between what and what. So this is the configuration. And while you're configuring these nodes, the labs ones, you can see a preview of the visualization right away. And this makes for faster development, fewer iterations over the design until you get to an interface that you like. And finally, as I said in the beginning, we are low code, but we're not against code. So KNIME does integrate with R, with Python. So we do have R and Python view nodes that you can use if you want to use scripting, if you want to create highly customizable graphics for your data apps. And this is an example of a visualization node. And, you know, after it's configured, after you already establish what variables you want to use for the scatter plot, I'll show this to you in the demo. Once you execute it, so the visualization is created, the first thing about execution is that there is a little semaphore, a traffic light metaphor in KNIME at every node. Before you configure it, it's going to be red. After it's configured, so in this particular case, after you tell KNIME what variables are going to be used and what's the title of the scatter plot, it becomes yellow. And after you execute, it becomes green. So after you have your scatter plot created, after everything has been executed, you can right-click it. And if you go all the way to the bottom, you are going to see that there is this interactive view option here. And when you click it, you actually get to the visualization. And here you can see that some points in the scatter plot look larger than others. It's because you can hover with your mouse and perform selections. And when you select an area of a visualization, the points inside the selection do get larger. And the cool thing is that you can save by applying the selection here. You can see this in the visualizations. It will allow you to apply the selections. By applying the selection, you can create a new column in your data set, the data set that is being used for the creation of the scatter plot. You can create a new column that will have Boolean values, true and false, true for the points that were selected and false for the points that were not selected. This can be used downstream in the logic of your workflow, depending on the application you have in mind. So it's very powerful. You can even alter the data by doing the selections. And this very quickly, just to show you how this KNIME Labs nodes look like. You can do all the configuration here to the right. And as you go, you can see how the view updates as you change the configurations to the left. So you don't have to execute and then go to the interactive view. You know, while you're configuring, you already see how it looks like. And this is very useful, depending on what you have in mind. It makes the iterations faster. You end up with the final design faster. Okay, so now that we talked a little bit about visualizations, I want to talk a little bit more about components. Components are going to be super important for data apps because a data app relies heavily on composite views. So what is this composite view? Inside a component, you can add multiple nodes that correspond to different visualizations or different widgets. Here we are inside a component. How do I know that we are inside a component? Because I have these two quasi squares here, meaning component input and component output. So I know that I am inside a component. And then inside a component, if I have visualization nodes or widget nodes, I end up with a composite view, which is going to be this interface here. This is a data app in a way, right? It's a simple one. Inside this component, we don't have a lot of logic. We just have these three visualizations and a widget. But this is why the components are going to be important here, because they are the ones that actually gather all of the widget and visualization nodes that are inside them and render an interface for you. So multiple nodes can be combined. The cool thing about this composite views is that selections in one of the views can be transmitted to others. Here, for example, if I select this group in the bar chart, all of the points that correspond to this group get a little larger in this scatter plot because these visualizations are connected to the same data. Here we also have this little widget that by playing with it, I control which nodes are going to be transmitted to all of these visualizations, right? The widget comes before the visualization. So depending on the values that I set for this widget, through the interface, the data that is going to be transmitted to these three visualizations changes. So the widgets are really cool because they enable interactivity as well. We interact on the interface and then the data changes and it's transmitted to the visualizations differently. Here, we have another component. This one just has two visualizations. Note that these components are very simple. They have very few nodes inside. They couldn't have more logic. Our demo certainly does. And here, if I select a few nodes in the scatter plot, I can see that this selection is transmitted to the table view here at the bottom, right? The table view is at the bottom, the scatter plot is at the top. They are inside a single component, so they generate this composite view, this very simple data app here. And there is a transmission between them because they are tied to the same data as well. Another cool thing about components and how they allow for the development of data apps is that you don't have to waste any time with CSS and JavaScript anymore, trying to determine the size of these visualizations and the widgets, where they're going to be on the screen. You can do all of that using the layout button, which is this button here on KNIME Analytics platform, that once you click it, it opens this dialog here. And this dialog will ask you to generate a grid and put the different visualizations and the widgets that you have inside this component in different parts of this grid. And then you can add more columns to this grid. You can reduce the size, you can increase the size. And by doing that and dragging and dropping the visualization and widget nodes in different parts of this grid, you end up with different layouts. So you can play with that as well. It's much simpler, much faster than trying to use JavaScript. I can tell you that for a fact. Now I just want to give a few more notes for you on widgets and buttons. That this is going to be the third important part for data apps. Visualizations, the component plays an important part, and also the widgets and buttons. And why? Because they expose the settings for the components, they expose the settings for the data app. And then because of that, you end up with an interface that is much more powerful than just graphs, right? We have widgets for input of data. So you can type in credentials, you can type in your name, your email, string widgets. You can send numbers, your age, it can be a widget. You can upload files, we have widgets for that. You can download files, and you can perform a lot of selection and filtering as well, using filter widgets and selection widgets. So in that last slide that we saw, in one of those previous slides, there was a little widget. There were 3 visualizations and a little widget controlling the range of the data that was going to be used for the visualizations. So that one is the interactive range slider filter widget. It's a long name and it's very powerful as well. We also have a very important widget that allows for the re-execution of certain parts of the data app. It's a button, the refresh button widget. It's basically a little button on your interface. You add a text to it, and if you click it, it refreshes everything that is downstream from that. So all of the nodes in your workflow that come after, to the right, after that node, connected to that node. So there is a branch that comes from that node. So all of that part of your workflow is going to be re-executed as you click that button. So that is really nice because it allows people to play with different inputs. They upload different files, they send different things. And when they click the refresh button widget, all of this new information is captured and used to re-execute that branch of the workflow that comes after the refresh button widget. And if you want to learn more about widgets, you can read these different blog posts that we have on KNIME blog. The first one is more generic, how to deliver data apps with KNIME. Then we have this one that is very specific on widgets. And then we have this one that is very specific on the refresh button. And this is just a quick example of an interface here. You see, so this, a data app as well. And this corresponds to a customer survey. And we ask for the first name, the last name, the age, the country, email address. We ask for a bunch of things. And obviously, this can vary, right? People can give different values for these widgets. And the underlying workflow is going to have these nodes here. A string widget for the first name, a string widget for the last name, one for the email, an integer widget for the age. And this information is collected. It populates variables that in KNIME we call them flow variables. And they are combined with this node here, the merge variables node. And then once this component is executed, remember the data apps are always going to be inside the components, a new output is generated. So if you change the values, they are recaptured, they repopulate these variables, and a new output is generated if the component is re-executed. So this is the theoretical part. This is what I wanted to talk about for now before going to our demo. See KNIME Analytics platform. Let me just here. It's bigger. You can see it. And this is how it looks like, right? There are all these different panels, but the ones that matter the most for us today are going to be the node repository. That's where you look for the nodes, and the workflow editor. And this is the demo here. This is my workspace. I double click it and it opens. And this is exactly the workflow that corresponds to our stockout example. So when I was building this with my colleagues, we start with the Excel reader node. We came here, right, and typed Excel. It's a little slow. Here it is. You can type and then you find it, and then you drag and you drop it here. And then you configure it by right-clicking and configuring it. And then you have to specify the file that you want to use for your workflow, right? So I'll delete it and show how this one is configured. You can see that it has already been configured. That's why right here in our traffic light metaphor, it's yellow. But if you open it, you can see that I'm using an Excel file. Naturally, that's why it's an Excel reader node, which has data for stockouts. And if I right-click it and execute it, and I go all the way to the bottom here and I open file table, I see what the file looks like. So I have the stockouts for different months, for the different warehouse locations, and I also have an indication of the types of items, which are also referred to as warehouse sublocations, because inside a warehouse, the different types of items, regular, critical, slow moving, they are in different parts of the warehouse. And then I have a meta node here. I'm not going to go into much detail here, but what it does is that it groups this data, aggregates this data in a way that I can have all the stockouts per type of item per warehouse. So I can come here and execute it, but instead of executing just one node, I'm executing the entire meta node, so all of the contents of this meta node. But after executing this, and I know it's been executed because I have this check sign here and it's green, I right-click it, go all the way to the bottom. And then this is the output. This is one of the outputs of this meta node, right? So I have the month again, I have the warehouse sublocations, I have the numbers of stockouts, and I have the warehouse location. And inside that meta node, I also aggregated the data in such a way that not only do I have the stockouts for the different 5 cities, but I also have the aggregation for all of the cities. So it's a new location in all. And then after I have the data like that, so this is part of the logic that was required for Claudia's needs, I create this data app here using one component, which I named stockout. But before we dive into this component, I want to execute it and show you how it looks like. So instead of clicking execute, I will click execute in open views because it is a data app. It is a component that has views inside. Let me execute it and show it to you. This is how it looks like. We have here a widget that controls the title. Let me make it big here for you. We have another widget here that gives Claudia instructions so she understands how this dashboard works. And then we have two widgets here that allow Claudia to select different locations and also warehouse categories. And by playing with that, by playing with the locations and the categories, the visualizations are updated, right? When I select location, I update both. And when I update the warehouse category, I update this visualization. You can see that they're interactive. I can zoom them. And then here, all the way to the right, I have a few more widgets that tell Claudia the prediction for stockouts for the current month, for Memphis, and for critical items. And then I have a little logic here that tells Claudia if this number means that everything is under control or not. And I will explain to you the logic behind that. Let's get inside this component then. On macOS, I click Command, and then I right click it, and I open a new tab, and now I am inside the component, and you see all of the nodes here. So let me go little by little, explaining to you. These two widgets here that are not connected to anything, they're very static. They just correspond to the title, that stockout dashboard at the top, and that little guide all the way to the left that is an intro for the dashboard. So Claudia knows what to expect here. So these are easy. And then we have this one that is a bit more sophisticated, the single selection widget. And this one is going to correspond. Sorry, let me reopen the view here. Keep it open too. This is going to correspond to this selection of location here. That widget corresponds to this part here. Let me show you how it's configured. Basically, I add some text, select location, no description. I want it to look like a drop down, and then I give all the different options, right? For warehouse locations, all Memphis, Allentown, Savannah, and And I also select a value to be the default one. So when you start executing that data app, this is going to be the selected value. And whatever value Claudia selects, whatever value is selected in the interface is going to populate a variable, a flow variable named location selection. So after Claudia plays with that interface, the underlying workflow, which is this one here, right? The underlying data app is going to capture whatever was given as a selection in the interface, and is going to populate this variable. So location selection is now Memphis, because when we were playing with the interface, we used Memphis. And then the value of this variable is passed to another node. This one is a row filter node. And along with all of the data that corresponds to what I pre-processed, the data that I showed to you, right? That has all of the stockouts per month. So this node gets this data and gets this selection that was made by Claudia, and it filters the data in such a way that I end up with only the rows that correspond to Memphis after I execute it. And this is how it looks like, Memphis. I only have Memphis here. And then I use this data not only to send to the rest of this workflow here that we're going to explore, but I send this filtered data to that bar chart at the top that we are going to use a bar chart labs node just because it's really cool. Let me show to you how it's configured, how it is. Here it is. You can see that these are going to be the stockouts that I have in the data for Memphis because it's already filtered, separated by type, right? Regular items, critical items, slow moving items. And if I want to play with this design, you can see that it gets updated right away. So that data that was filtered by Memphis is passed. So this is downstream, right? Another thing as well that I want to say before I move on is that, can you see that there's a little cycle symbol here in this widget? It's because while I was configuring it, there are a few tabs for configuration, right? And one of them is re-execution. And I selected this option here. So what it means is that every time a new selection is made, everything that is downstream from this node gets re-executed. So the row filter gets re-executed with the new value that Claudia sent, in this case, Memphis, and all of this, the bar chart gets re-executed, and all of these parts here of the workflow that come downstream get executed as well. So this part here, I won't get into much detail, but what it does is that depending on the city that was selected, it gets the set of available categories for that city. So regular items, critical items, slow-moving items, all of these three categories are available for Memphis, but maybe they're not all available for all of the cities. So it's something that is flexible, right? So we need a little bit of logic to make sure that we get the categories that are present. And why do we need that? We need that to populate the options for our second widget, which is that one that is in the interface right below the location. And that allows us to select the warehouse categories. So regular items, critical items, and slow-moving items are present for Memphis, but maybe what if they were not present, right? All of them. So we need this to be updated depending on the selection that is made here. So how do we do that? We have this logic here that populates a variable, a flow variable named warehouse sublocation. And currently for Memphis, the three values are present, right? So it's going to be an array with all of the values. And these values are sent to the single selection widget. This is how it's configured. I have the label again. The output for whatever is selected here, critical, regular, slow moving, is going to populate another variable, the warehouse category, WHCat. But you can see that there are no possible choices here, right? Where are they? They are coming from that variable. So in this tab here named flow variable, I state that I can override the possible choices with the values that are coming from that other node, warehouse sublocation. And again, I want this node to re-execute everything that is downstream from this. And that's why I selected here. Okay, so let me go a bit more quickly. After this is selected, I do a bit more filtering, and then I send the data to a line plot. Again, I'm going to use the labs because I want Claudia to see the trends for the stockouts for both 2021 and 2022. So this is how it looks like, the visualization. But if I want to configure, you can see that the dialog is right by the visualization. Right as you play with it, you can see it getting refreshed right away. And I send this data that is totally filtered by city, by type of category. And I send this to another component. This is not a data app. In this case, it's just, you know, a simple component that contains a specific logic for a problem. And this is going to be the machine learning logic for this problem. This component contains everything that is necessary to do the stockout forecasting. This doesn't even need to be developed by the same person because components can be shared. So actually this one was on KNIME Hub and we got it and it was perfect for the purpose of this demo. And then inside this component, some logic gets that data and it generates a forecast for the new month for the location and the type of item. And this is the output that we get from this logic here. We get the prediction of stockout. So for Memphis, for critical items, I am predicting 82.58 stockouts. And this is the average for previous months. So for critical items in Memphis, previously, it has been on average 90-ish stockouts. So I use these two numbers, the forecast and the average, to do a bit more logic. First of all, I use this another text output widget just to plot that on the interface, that value, right? So as you can see here, all the way to the right, I'm plotting this value here. I use a widget for that, prediction for the current month, and I do that. But for this last widget here, the green message in this particular case, I have a little bit of logic. I compare these two nodes. I use these nodes here for that. I compare these two values, the average and the forecast. And if the forecast is lower than the average, I am going to use a green message I'm going to use a text output widget with a green message stating that everything is okay, the stockouts are under control. But if that value is larger than the average, with this case switch here, I am going to actually activate this branch here and not this one here at the top. I'm going to activate the branch at the bottom that is going to create a yellow message saying that actually the number of stockouts is a bit worrisome. It's larger than the previous average. So this is, it has a little bit of logic, it has a lot of visualizations, it has a few widgets. And I want to finish this demo by showing the layout button here to you and showing you how this grid was used to play around. For example, if I want to make this smaller, I can, play with it and reduce the size. Let me just show to you how it looks like. It doesn't look very pretty, I'll tell you that. It looks prettier before, they look really small, the visualizations. It has all this space here. So, by playing with that layout node, you can play with the sizes, but also with the disposition. You can add more columns if you want to. You can remove the columns. You can add another line, another row, and then, very easy, very drag and droppy. What you see is what you get. And this is what I wanted to say when it comes to, this is the demo that I wanted to show you. I hope this sparked your interest for how to build data apps. You see that how easy it is when you compare it to JavaScript and all of that. And I hope that you can also see how useful it is, right? How it actually creates an interface that has visualizations that get refreshed and re-executed. So, it's very insightful. There is some logic controlling the message. It's very powerful. But now I want to go back to our slides. So let me share that with you. Let me share that with you. I just want to close this presentation by giving you a few notes on data app deployment. Because, as I said, you can build data apps completely for free, very simply using KNIME Analytics platform. But if you want to deploy to a larger audience, which is what we have done with this tiny URL address that I sent to you, you are going to need another product, right? And we do have a product for that. The product, as I mentioned earlier, is KNIME Business Hub. It allows you to deploy and monitor your data apps so they can be available on a browser for a larger audience. It also allows for collaboration across different stakeholders, across larger teams, sharing and reusing components, workflows within an organization. So all of this is possible with KNIME Business Hub, with KNIME Analytics platform. You can build the data apps. You can execute the data apps as well, as I showed you within KNIME Business Hub, right? So you get the interface, you execute the components and you get the interface. But if you want to have that on the cloud, if you want to have that on a browser, then you're going to need KNIME Business Hub. If you are a professor, if you are an educator, if you work for a university, or if you work for a nonprofit, you may qualify for a license of KNIME Business Hub. So if you're interested, do get in touch with us and let's talk a little bit about it and see if it makes sense for you to have a license for KNIME Business Hub for your application. And in the context of our stockout example, for example, Henry, the data scientist, he leveraged KNIME Business Hub to deploy, to get the work of different colleagues. For example, that component that does the forecasting, it wasn't developed by Henry, it can be developed by someone else. And he can leverage that work and deploy on a machine, or maybe even the cloud, and make it available for Claudia, so that Claudia can access that even on her phone through her browser, right? Using an address like the one I sent to you. So this is what I had to say today. Thank you very much. This is the presentation I had.
Let's start with, this is a question from Michael, but within the component input and output, there are nodes. So how do we define the parameters and values that are going to be passed to the next node?
Inside a component, or how do you define what is going to be passed to another node? Well, each node, let me go back to one of the slides here, maybe one of the slides in the very beginning. So each node, regardless of whether it is inside a component or not, generates a specific type of output. This is predetermined. This is the way the node works. For example, the nodes that have this black triangle as the output generate tabular data sets. So if it's a tabular data sets, this is what you're going to pass to the next node. So you need to use a node that gets as an input a tabular data set. And then obviously the node doesn't need to use all of the columns in this data set, right? It depends on the node. If it's a scatter plot, for example, in the configuration, you're going to have to select 2 columns, numeric columns. So this is how it works. And it's the same with components. Whatever you send to when you have a component in your workflow, you get all of there are 2 different ways, right? You can create the component, then add the nodes inside. But usually what you do is that you create a little part of your workflow, you have the nodes, and then you select a few different nodes and you create a component. So the input that is required by the first node inside this component is going to be the input of this component. And then you can configure this a bit further. You can add a few more parts to your component. You can determine the types for these parts, but naturally, the input for the component is going to be the input for the first node inside the component.
Oh, sorry, I thought. Okay, thank you. So for the next question, where was I? Here we go. So with the visualization widgets, is there like support within that widget to drill down further into detailed views, or is that something that you'd have to build separate?
It depends on what you mean by detailed views. You mean like zooming in, selecting? What do you mean by detailed views? Because zooming in is possible, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Mike, if you can give us more details on what you mean by detailed views, that would be great if you're still with us. And then let's give someone. There's okay. So again, another question from Michael. There's a line plot. There's a line plot and get stock out prediction. Select category with components and widgets in there. Are those considered data apps or data sub functions? And how do we define data sub functions to be made callable within other workspaces?
Okay, so if it has a visualization node, if it has one of these blue nodes or a widget node, it will generate a composite view, and then it can be a data app, right? Data app is just the name for that. Now I don't know exactly what you mean by data sub function, but if you mean like a function, like in programming, usually we use components or meta nodes for that. And the meta nodes cannot be shared, but components can. Components can be shared, and you can even host components on your KNIME Hub space. KNIME Hub is, our repository you have your public spaces, and you can upload your workflows and your components, and you can share these components with others. So for example, in our demo, that component that does the forecasting, it was shared. It is a shared component. And we get that straight from KNIME Business Hub and add that to the workflow. So yeah, you can share components, you can send links to components, you can upload them on KNIME Hub and share with your friends and your colleagues, but not meta nodes. And the components, then they can correspond to functions, right? They can do different things, different functionalities. And if they have visualization nodes or widgets, they will have a composite view, and they can then be a data app.
Okay, sounds good. And then from Brady, how did the selection widget know which values are available for a variable if the data table wasn't passed to the widget node?
In that case, you mean the first one? The first one, we type the values, right? The Memphis, all, ta, 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 ta. We typed that. That was hard-coded. But you can use a flow variable, as we did for the second widget, and then you can populate that with the variable nodes, going to the flow variable tab.
So do you have data on scaling characteristics? In common use, is there a typical row or data size limitation? Oh, where'd it go? Sorry, everything just moved on me.
Is the question about scalability?
I think so. So like, do you have data on scaling characteristics, or in common use, is there a typical row or data size limitation beyond which these workflows work for users?
No. this KNIME Analytics platform is built over, it's built over Java, right? So it runs on the JVM. So it's really going to depend on how you set up that. If your machine
Okay.
has a lot of memory, then KNIME can run with a lot of memory. If you have this running on AWS or Azure, if you have a powerful machine, then it's limited depending on the hardware you have. There's no limitation per se in the software.